Welcome to the I Work for Him podcast. I'm Michael Miracle, producer of the I Work for Him radio program, the voice of the faith and work movement. Our mission is to transform the workplace of every Christian into a mission field. What does that look like in your workplace? Let's find out right now.
You've tuned into I Work for Him, the mouthpiece for the faith and work movement. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. Kind of guest hosting today as we change things up a little bit. Check us out online at iwork4him.com. That's iwork4him.com. And on Facebook, I Work for Him. And of course, check out where we've gathered together all the voices of the faith and work movement and podcasts on the awakenpodcastnetwork.com. awakenpodcastnetwork.com. If there's one thing I know is that the more things remain the same, the more things change. Okay, that happens all the time. At I Work for Him, we've had to pivot many times, and today is a momentous time where we shift once more. We realized that the everyday Christian working woman needed a show dedicated to her and her unique challenges that she faces every day. Today, we introduce you to the sheWorks4Him podcast. Yeah, I said that kind of funny, but sheWorks4Him podcast. We're going to soft launch this on August the 16th, but we wanted to preview it here on an I Work for Him show so you know that you need to look for the sheWorks4Him podcast on all your podcast platforms on August the 16th, 2021. And we'll hard launch it with a big rollout on September 6th of 2021. This podcast dedicated to Christian working women everywhere. So take it from here, Martha.
You've tuned in to sheWorks4Him, where we're going to connect Christian working women to God, resources, and to one another. We are your hosts, Martha Brangenberg, Catherine Gates, and Nadya Dickson. You can check us out online at sheWorks4Him.com and on Facebook and YouTube at sheWorks4Him.
Out of the 150 million workers in the United States, 55 million are believers. 55% of them are women. That means Christian working women make up 20% of the entire workforce in America. But where do they go for encouragement and equipping them to live out their faith at work?
For the last 8 years, I Work for Him Media has been focused on capturing the stories of Christ followers living out their faith at work. We've brought you interviews of everyday believers who are making a difference, and we've connected you with resources like books and ministries that are focused on equipping you for your mission in your workplace. Today, we launched the sheWorks4Him broadcast dedicated to you, the Christian working woman.
Until now, there's not one digital place where every Christian working woman can go to find all the kingdom-focused, women-focused workplace ministry resources. That changes today. Welcome to the sheWorks4Him podcast, a podcast dedicated to you, the Christian working woman, and created to empower you to live out your calling at work so that the world knows, hey, she works for him.
We are your hosts. I'm Catherine Gates, Executive Director of Women in the Marketplace, online at womeninmarketplace.net.
And I am Nadya Dickson, National Director of the Master's Program for Women, online at the mastersprogramforwomen.org.
And I'm Martha Brangenberg with I Work for Him Ministries, online at iwork4him.com. You've tuned in to sheWorks4Him, where we connect Christian working women to God, resources, and each other. Check us out online at sheworks4him.com and on Facebook, sheWorks4Him. Now let's get into our show today. Catherine, I want to just start with you for a minute. We're going to let people get to know us a little bit during this show. So tell us a little bit about your faith in the marketplace story.
Absolutely. I really started my career thinking that it all depended on me, that I had to be self-sufficient, that I had to work really hard to prove myself. And that worked for me for a while. For the first 18 years, I was decently successful until everything fell apart. All of a sudden, I found myself divorced, a single mother, and I had to restart my entire career. Thankfully, I recognize now that God was pursuing me the whole time. He was placing people in my life who were pointing me back to Him. And so one of the jobs I had taken during that transition period was a position with a building products distributor. And that's where I met Joy. Now, this was on Long Island. Joy was the first person I ever saw live out her faith at work. She would give glory to God for every sale. She would pray with her customers. She was very outspoken about her faith, but not in a way that was pushy. And it was actually, I observed the people around her and they respected her. You know, they may not have agreed with her, but they respected her. And I was at a point in my faith where it just caused me to take a step back and say, what would that look like for me to live out my faith at work? Maybe that's something I need to explore. And so I actually started talking about it with a group of women before I moved to Northwest Arkansas. And it was here that my whole faith and work journey really took off. I was attending at a church, and that first Labor Day weekend, David Roth from Work Matters gave the Labor Day weekend sermon, and he talked about faith and work, and he talked about Work Matters. And as soon as I discovered that there was an organization that helped people live out their faith at work, I got involved right away, and the rest is history.
So tell us one thing that actually changed about your work as a result of you understanding that your work mattered and trying to implement your faith better into your day-to-day. What is one thing that you can think of that really changed?
The biggest thing, the most significant thing was it didn't all depend on me and my strength and my ability. Now I could turn to God and I could lean on Him for strength. I could go to Him and pray for wisdom. And if something didn't go the way I planned, I could turn to Him and say, Lord, I trust you that you're going to work this out for good. And so it really helped me approach my work with greater excellence, with greater peace, and even treating people in a way, regardless of whatever challenges or interpersonal conflicts there might be, to look for ways to bring love into the situation. So, Nadya, what about you?
Thank you, Catherine. I really toggled back and forth in my mind about whether or not I was supposed to be a pastor or a businesswoman. And because I was really putting myself and putting God in a box, I vacillated back and forth, and I actually played those roles. I went back and forth from being a businesswoman to being a staff pastor. And when I went back into the marketplace, I felt like I have such a heart and a desire to see the kingdom advance. Am I really doing the right thing? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until some time in prayer, just putting my heart out before the Lord, because I didn't want to miss His call on my life. And also a number of mentors that came around me. It was actually one of Oz Hillman's, blogs that he put out that I realized there was even such a thing as a marketplace minister. Mm. That's when I realized that's what I was. And so that really helped relieve any type of pressure or wrong thinking at that time. That's really how I started out. And as I was working in a consulting firm, I realized that was my mission field. Hmm.
So what changed when you realized that, Nadya, when you saw that you could be a minister right there where you were working? What actually changed in your work?
Well, a lot like Catherine, I prayed intentionally about each day and what it held for me. And Lord, what are we doing today? At the Performance Group, which was the management consulting firm that I worked at. And how do I create value for our clients? How do you want me to connect to our people? How can I meet their needs so that it's really creating value for them? And then also the people that I had the ability to overtly pray with, I did. Mm-hmm. And those who I could not, I prayed on Monday mornings in a boardroom with some other Christians for our clients that week. So we were very intentional about having God use us in the space of private enterprise.
And we'll be right back with more from sheWorks4Him in just a moment.
Hey guys, we're going to take a break from our conversation with Martha Brangenberg, Catherine Gates, and Nadya Dickson as they introduce to you the sheWorks4Him podcast. Make sure you check for it to be released on August the 16th on all your favorite podcast platforms. We'll be right back.
Did you know that God has a calling on your life? It's true. He's called you to bring Jesus to the world. For some, that may look like a pulpit or a foreign mission field, but for most of us, it looks like a construction site, a cubicle, a hospital, or a classroom. Wherever it is that you work, live, volunteer, and invest, that is your mission field. To learn more about integrating your faith into your work and retirement, check out our books, I Work for Him, She Works for Him, and I Retire for Him by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore.
Hey, welcome back to I Work for Him as we're having a fabulous conversation with Catherine Gates, Nadya Dickson, and Martha Brangenberg as they introduce to you and roll out the sheWorks4Him podcast. Take it from here.
Hi, I'm Nadya Dickson. Welcome back to the sheWorks4Him podcast. And I'm here with hosts today, Martha Brangenberg and Catherine Gates. And I just want to ask you a question, Martha. What about you? Can you tell us a little bit about your faith in the marketplace?
You know, it's been an interesting journey because Jim and I are entrepreneurs and we've owned several businesses over the years, and we always lived by biblical principles. We always knew to treat our customers well, to have integrity in our financials, to go above and beyond, things like that. And once in a while, we prayed with people too. You know, if we were in insurance, so you often were dealing with people during losses of their home or car, or an accident, a life, whatever that might be. But we never understood that that was really ministering. We thought we do that during the day, make money to tithe to the church, to work with the teens on the weekends, right? And we loved that, and that was ministering, but it wasn't there was only reserved time for ministering. So once we discovered that that was our calling as well, things that we were doing as entrepreneurs, God gifted us that way. God gave us those abilities, and to do them well was serving Him, and then to serve the people we were serving well, we could be Jesus to them. Like, that was such a revolutionary idea for Jim and I, and it just really changed our trajectory that ultimately led, to I Work for Him, because we're the kind of people, when we learn something, we like to share it with others.
So, Martha, when you realized that your work was an opportunity to serve God, how did that change your work? How did that change your approach to your work?
Well, it was interesting because one of the places during that period of time when Jim and I were really, reading and discovering and talking about having this conversation, I was working in a Christian organization, running a retail space with, a dozen or more employees. And I realized that even in that space, serving them had a whole different perspective to me as I ministered to them and ministered to my customers than I'd ever had before. So it really changed, how I even talked to people when I was hiring them, how I prayed with them during the day. I knew that I was setting a tone that, for me, a lot of times I was the very first employer that a lot of the teenagers that worked for me had. I'm like, what if I can set the tone so that they understand something that took me into my 40s before I learned? And so it really changed my perspective and how I was able to relate to the people that reported to me. So it was pretty good. So let's talk about our passion for deciding to have a weekly podcast to help equip Christian working women. Why are we doing this, ladies? Let's let people kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit and understand, because there are other podcasts out there, but how is sheWorks4Him podcast going to be different? Nadya, why don't you address that first?
Well, what I love about the whole premise behind our podcast, Martha and Catherine, is that there are a lot of different opportunities for people to learn about leadership skills. But I think what's really significant about this podcast is that we talk to Christian working women about practical ways that they're living their faith out at work, so that others that are listening in can help identify their own workplace situation and where they could actually apply their faith. Maybe they needed some inspiration or courage. And just to hear somebody else's story and identify with that, I think that's powerful.
Yeah, I think it gives people hope when they are able to see other people living out their faith at work, especially through some of the challenges. And we've been through all of us have been through a lot of challenges, that they can see how God will show up, that they can trust God. And so there just aren't enough role models. And here we are having an opportunity to bring people together who actually are living it and have inspirational stories to tell that can encourage others.
And I just want to also highlight the fact that our desire is to be a collaborative, to show the world that it doesn't matter what organization you might get your paycheck from, or you might volunteer for, or you might represent. We're all part of the kingdom. And so this is to be a very collaborative example very open-handed. I love to have the symbol, just holding our lives open-handedly and saying, Lord, we want to work together for the kingdom. Because John 17 says, if the world sees that we all have unity, then they will see Christ. And that is our goal. So we want that to be an expression of everything that we do on the She Works for Him podcast.
Absolutely.
That's so inspiring. And in my work, I constantly see Christian working women feeling underutilized in their spiritual gifting and often even feeling ill-equipped for leading in their faith at work. What have you two seen?
Well, I think for me, that, it's just a matter of giving women the opportunity to see that they are created in God's image, that they are made uniquely. And we want to celebrate that and share that with others. One of the things that is we share stories of other people living out their faith, other Christian working women in their workspace, whatever that workspace might be, that we're allowing their story to inspire where somebody else may not have ever felt equipped and said, I can't do that. But they can hear from somebody else's story a little glimmer of hope that they can make a difference in the world that they influence.
A lot of women struggle with but navigating all of the different roles and bringing confidence into that. And so the more, again, that they see, oh, I need to approach my work from my identity in Christ. I can actually, like, God cares about my work and He wants me to seek wisdom from Him. The more they're able to approach even the most challenging situations with confidence, but at the same time, bring humility and power and wisdom into those situations.
We're going to take a break and we'll be right back with more from She Works for Him podcast. Stay right here.
Hey, thanks for tuning into I Work for Him. So excited for you guys to see this inaugural podcast with the She Works for Him staff. These guys are going to host a show that is going to expand across the country, rolling out on a soft launch August 16th, hard launch on September the 6th, 2021. The She Works for Him podcast. Look for it on all your favorite podcast platforms. You're listening to I Work for Him. We'll be right back.
As Christian women, we have many roles. From daughter, sister, friend, wife, and mother to analyst, accountant, executive, or educator, is it possible to balance our roles at work and home in a way that honors God? The answer is yes, and our new book, She Works for Him, will help show you how. Written to celebrate, encourage, and equip women in the workforce, She Works for Him discusses the diverse experiences of today's Christian working woman. Pick up a copy by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore.
Hey, welcome back to I Work for Him. As we talk today with Martha Brangenberg, Nadya Dickson, and Catherine Gates, the three hosts of the She Works for Him podcast, as we prepare to roll out a separate podcast dedicated to Christian working women everywhere. She Works for Him podcast will be released. Soft launch on the 16th of August, 2021, and hard launch on the 6th of September. You have got to be ready to sign up for the She Works for Him podcast. Tell all your Christian working friends. Now, back to these three ladies.
Welcome back to She Works for Him. I'm Catherine Gates, and I'm here with Martha Brangenberg and Nadya Dickson. Ladies, what can our listeners expect to hear on our podcast? What types of guests, what types of resources would you share what you think?
Well, I think one of the things that is going to set us apart is the fact that we are not limiting to a certain area of work, a certain pay level of anything. We're looking for women that are to interview that will be inspiring to every Christian working woman out there, that they can relate to, that they can hear their faith and work story, something practical that they've been living out. So that's one of the things that I think that's really going to set She Works for Him podcast apart.
The other thing I'm really excited about is the type of ministries and resources that some of these women represent and get to share, and even some of the events that they would be holding that would connect in different places across the country, so that no matter where our listeners are, there's always something close by that they can connect to.
And relate to also, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
So Martha, how can our listeners connect to us online?
Well, it's going to be very simple. It's just sheWorks4Him.com. SheWorks, the number 4Him.com is the website. And that same spelling and everything is where you'll find us on social media. So, and that's going to be changing and increasing and giving you lots of opportunities, because I know some people are Facebook happy, some are Instagram, some like to tweet, some like to watch on YouTube. So there'll be a lot of options out there. So just search for She Works for Him. But our website will give all of those links, sheWorks4Him.com. Catherine, in our final couple of minutes, why don't you tell people about Women in the Marketplace, which is the organization that you currently represent?
Yes. Women in the Marketplace got started out of noticing the hunger that women had to connect with other women of faith who were in the workplace, who wanted to honor God with their work, but also navigate all of their other roles in a God-honoring way. And so we do a couple of things. One, we help people build relationships. We help them build fellowship. We help them live out their faith at work by providing resources to live at the biblical workplace Bible studies, and we help them get into small groups. And then finally, we want to impact the community as well. We do that through a couple of different funds to help women entrepreneurs as well as helping women in crisis. Nadya, why don't you close us out by telling us about the Master's Program for Women?
Well, Catherine, I love what you do with the Marketplace Women in your organization. It's so important for the women to connect and collaborate. The Master's Program for Women is an opportunity for women to take a deep dive and really understand what the elements of life mastery are, balance, margin, and focus, so that they can, as they discover their calling, their kingdom assignment, they can go into their life mission on a firm foundation. And we do these all across the country, also in cohorts and small groups. It includes retreats and weekend retreats for different cohorts. So it's just a fantastic and complementary organization, really, to what you guys are doing. Yes. Also, I love learning more about what you do and how we can connect our women to it.
And that's one of the things that we are going to continue to share on She Works for Him podcast is the resources that God has birthed in the hearts of so many people across this amazing world that we live in. And so we want to make that opportunity out there for people to hear other stories, to hear other organizations, and to be inspired by those resources and connect to them. And you can connect to that through sheWorks4Him.com. You've been listening to She Works for Him with your hosts, Martha Brangenberg, Catherine Gates, and Nadya Dickson. We're Christian working women helping other Christian working women to live out their calling as she works for Him.
Thanks for tuning in to I Work for Him today as you got to hear the inaugural broadcast of the She Works for Him podcast. Stay tuned and make sure you sign up as we roll off She Works for Him as its own podcast on August the 16th, 2021. You've been listening to I Work for Him with your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg. We're Christ followers. Our workplace, it's our mission field. But ultimately, I work for Him.
Thank you for listening to the I Work for Him podcast with your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg. Please visit iWork4Him.com to learn more about connecting your faith and work, to join the I Work for Him Nation, or subscribe to our weekly blog. You can also follow us on social media at I Work for Him to stay up to date and meet our guests. If today's message spoke to you, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. Your review will launch more workplace missionaries across America. That's at I Work for Him and online, iWork4Him.com. I work the number 4him.com.